I don't have a planer or a jointer, so I only used a table saw and a few clamps to make this glue up top. Well, actually a couple more than a few. Actually 9 clamps to be exact. And a few cauls, which are just 1x3s wrapped in packing tape so the glue won't stick to them. I also used an Orbital Sander and some spray lacquer to finish it off. I started by cutting these 2x8s a little bit bigger than the size I wanted. Then I'll trim them down to the exact size after gluing. Instead of using a jointer I don't own, maybe one day, I squared up the edges by ripping both edges of the 2x8s, again making the width a little bigger than I need, and then I'll trim the glue up down for that perfect fit. Here's a good tip: lock down your table saw fence before you use it, or this will happen. After that wonky cut, I was glad I cut these boards a little big. It was easy to fix. I just flipped it around and then ripped it again, and it came out great. Next, I laid down a couple 36-inch Harbor Freight clamps over some plastic, and I used a couple scraps to prevent the clamps from digging into the wood. Then I applied a nice thick coat of glue to one edge of each board and lined them up. Because these boards aren't planed perfectly flat, the cauls really help keep them lined up. I use a clamp for each joint. These clamps put more pressure on the bottom. I think most clamps do. So to help for a more even glue up, I like to add a clamp on the top too. Then I cinched all the clamps down a little at a time to get even pressure all around. I let the glue dry overnight and then scraped the glue off with a paint scraper. Since this glue up is for the shop, I did a pretty quick sanding. I started with a 60 grit to really flatten it out, then 80, and finally a 120 grit. And finally I wiped it down and sprayed on 3 coats of lacquer.